if you are an attendee, please put in the chat your name, where you're from, anything you would like us to know about you, just so we can see who's all in the room. We'll wait one more minute and then we will get started. And panelists will do our round of introductions. So Jess, I can't. It's perfect. I had a camper once tell me that her favorite color was glitter, and that's my answer now. So. All right, it is 9:03, 12:03, 10:03, 11:03, whatever it is for you. Thank you all for being here. Please keep introducing yourself in the chat. I know from experience that these hours go so fast. So as people are coming in, we're going to get started because I want to have all the time possible to talk with this incredible panel about leadership and characteristics of future leaders or current leaders or emerging leaders, or we'll get into that, that are required for solving complex conservation problems. My name is Kathayoon Khalil. I lead the Conservation Learning Department at the New England Aquarium, and I'm of counsel with Canopy. And I'm going to let each of our panelists introduce themselves with their names, where they are joining us from today, and their favorite animal. We'll just do your favorite animal. It's a good one. It's a classic for a reason. Tanoia, we'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Thompson. I am currently a PhD student looking at organizational leadership in conservation orgs, and a consultant and a conservation impact fellow with the Cincinnati Zoo. Today, I have to say my favorite animal would be whale shark.
Oh, nice. Stephanie.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Arne. I am the Conservation Director at the Great Plains Zoo and the Butterfly House and Aquarium in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, my home state. My background is basically AZA zoological facilities all over the country, and ecotourism in 20 different countries. And I am excited to be here. My favorite animal today is also a shark. We'll go with hammerhead shark.
Only conservationists have to specify that it's their favorite animal today.
Yes.
Amy.
Or this hour.
I was actually going to say the exact same thing about my favorite animal. So I am Amy Rutherford. I'm the Vice President of Learning and Engagement here at the Birmingham Zoo. And what that includes is our sort of traditional pieces of education, our learning team, our interpretation and engagement, and volunteers, as well as a new position as of this week, our Manager of Staff Learning and Inclusion. So we're excited that is an investment in our internal professional development, leadership, and DEAI. So definitely related to this particular conversation as well. Today, my favorite animal is red panda, because we are currently on cub watch here at the zoo as well.
Oh my gosh, riveting. Love it. Misha.
Hi, everybody. I don't know if my video is as glitchy as it's showing up for me for all of you, so I hope that's not the case. But my name is Misha Bodie. I have been working in zoos and aquariums for over 20 years. I'm tuning in from Los Angeles, and I think that this question is very hard to answer for zoo and aquarium people. And I think I have resolved that when I get asked this question, my answer will be the Whangdoodle, because it comes from my favorite the first non-picture book that I ever read, and it kind of has streaks of conservation as well as sort of the intersection of science and imagination. And the Whangdoodle is the king of the world of imaginary creatures, where imaginary creatures go to feel safe.
Is that book The Last of the Really Great Whangdoodles by
Yes,
Julia?
it is.
Great.
It's the best.
An icon and a legend. Justin.
Hi, I'm Justin Birkhoff. I'm the Mammal Conservation Coordinator at the Global Center for Species Survival based at the Indianapolis Zoo. It does fit on a business card. The text is not that small. My favorite animal is the okapi.
Nice.
Today and most days, but not every day.
Jeff Flocken.
Hello, everybody. I'm kind of the wild card here, being outside of the zoo and aquarium community. But whenever Kathayoon asks me to do something, I'm always inclined to say yes. I am the president of the Humane Society International and co-founder of Emerging Wildlife Conservation Leaders Initiative. I'm excited to be here and talk with folks about what we should be looking for in our leaders of tomorrow. And my favorite animal, I'm going to go with today, pangolin.
Ooh, that's solid one. All right. So we are gathered here today in our continued conversations about leadership in the conservation field to think about what are the characteristics of leaders that we want to see in this and the next generation moving forward as we try to solve these increasingly complex conservation problems. I think with this conversation, I want to move a bit beyond some of the conversations we've had in the past. We know that leaders need to be diverse, but what does that really mean? We know that leaders need to come from a variety of different ecosystems, but what does that look like and how do we get there? And so I'm hoping with our panelists, we can curate some solutions as well as more questions, because I think a great mark of these conversations is that we come out with more to think about, even if we don't have the answers to all of our questions that we pose. So the first question I'm going to pose to the panel is to tell us a little bit about the capacity in which you think about leadership. This may not be your job, but where do you find yourself spending the most time thinking about the concept of leadership? And anyone can start.
First,
Okay, I unmuted my, oh, go ahead, Stephanie.
I'll just keep this short and sweet. I tend to think about leadership a lot when I fail, when I mess up, when I think I have it figured out and I'm responding in the right way as a leader, and it doesn't come out the right way, or I didn't apply what I've learned in the way that I wanted to. And then I tend to sit back, look at the books again, watch more videos, speak to my leaders that inspired me, and they seem to do it so flawlessly, and keep that right in the forefront and just wait for the next time that I can try to do it better. So failure, when I think I'm failing.
First attempts in learning. Someone taught you.
I can jump in next.
Yeah.
I tend to think about leadership when I am trying to pick up traits and behaviors and actions from people I admire. When I can really see something that's successful in leading other people or getting a issue resolved or moved to where it needs to be. I've definitely evolved in what I think of as a leader. I now recognize that there are so many different types of great leaders. Some are very quiet, some might be perceived as passive, but at the same time are seeing things get to where they need to be. And so I'm trying to take on more of those traits and characteristics. And that's when I really think about leadership, is when I see something that I want to model.
So I think about leadership in basically everything that we do trying to advance conservation. Nobody can do it alone. We all work on teams. And so for me, I think leadership, a characteristic of leadership or how it shows up is being a good team leader, because you can be a leader at all levels, regardless of what your role is. It's about supporting the people that you're working with, whether you're at the top of the org chart or, you're just getting your foot in the door. And I think that, leadership is really about helping the larger effort that your team is working towards.
I think I'll go next because to build off that, I think for me, I think about it most intentionally when I am meeting with my team, particularly, those direct reports who are managers themselves. So thinking about what kind of leader do they need for me to be right then, right? What do they need? Do they need me to remove barriers or just to support them, or what does that look like? And then also, how am I reinforcing and kind of continue to empower them to step into their leadership when in ways that are authentic for them?
Yeah, I'll echo a couple of the sentiments that have gone before. Isn't that team dynamic is, where you lead and how you lead changes within each group, within each, moment. And how that looks will change, whether you're leading out front and being vocal and facilitating, or if you are stepping back and encouraging other people to speak up. That's something that resonates with me a lot. I think to Jeff's point is modeling those behaviors. And sometimes it's modeling behaviors of leaders that you admire and people that you aspire to execute things in the same vein or through the same sort of vision or attitude. But also when you have leaders or supervisors that aren't doing it the way that it feels like it resonates with you, you know, working for leaders that have, you know, kind of an unbending, this is the way it works, it's my way or the highway sort of mentality, you know, you respond to that as well and realize that that's probably not a behavior you want to model. So those are the times that I think about it most.
And I think for me, building off of all the wonderful things everyone has already said, echoing all those things, but recently, this is going to be a little bit like the animal, you know, today leadership wise, being an organizational leadership PhD student, I've been thinking a lot about the leader follower dynamic and thinking about, you know, you really can't be a leader without followers. And that followership component is so critical. And so when we think about characteristics like empathy and self-awareness and emotional intelligence, those are all really important, but leaders are also still followers, and they have to follow something at some point in their life. And so I've just been really sort of teasing that apart for myself as a follower and a leader. And, you know, as everyone said, always looking to improve and support those around. So for today, that's what I'm thinking about right now.
That's fascinating. This idea of being a leader or follower is a false dichotomy, right? I think it's being a leader is an identity that we hold often, like I'm an emerging leader or I'm a future leader or a current leader, but it's not just one or the other. It shifts. And I love that dynamism. So thank you so much for all of those. So to get to the, you know, kind of one of the meatier questions of this conversation, and I hope that I'll pry as we go so that we can get deep into this. What do you see as the qualities of a phenomenal leader? So if you think about someone in your life that you've seen to be a phenomenal leader, what did they embody? How did they show up? And what do you try to emulate from that example? And thank you, Jess, for the reminder. Please, if you are in the audience, put your questions in the chat or your answers to these questions. I think I would really love to hear from everybody how you are thinking about this work.
I'm going to put Jeff on the spot because it's fun. But there's a few of us on this panel that are part of our leadership journey. Jeff played a large role in. So I think it's, you know, it's being authentic. It's being authentically yourself, knowing what your strengths are and playing to those, knowing what things are not nearly as strong, and finding people that can complement them for you. And we talk a lot about in leadership, and historically it's been very much like, let's work on our weaknesses. And there's a value in that, and you want to bring your weaknesses along and make them less weak, but ultimately you want to play to your strengths, and you want to do the things that are intrinsically and naturally your own and do them well. One thing that we've also learned, that I learned personally from Jeff, is that not everybody needs the same thing. So the conversations that you have are going to be are going to be adaptive to who that person is today. We'll go back to that theme: is today, this is what I need. Tomorrow I might need something else. And, you know, it's being empathetic, authentic, and vulnerable. There's things that we have learned from each other. You know, I have the pleasure of knowing everyone on this panel in some way, shape, or form, and I've learned from all of them. And I've idolized parts of their leadership style and tried to achieve them on my own. And I think I do an okay job. And some days I think I could do a better job. But I think those sorts of things has been really important to me. And I know that, you know, I can speak for at least a couple of us in this call that Jeff is part of the reason that we are the leaders that we are today.
Oh.
Now Jeff's gonna cry. This is very sad. Thank you, Justin. That was really nice.
I would like to follow with that as well, that being genuine, being authentic, being vulnerable, showing up and being a human being, and not trying to cover up that your kid was sick this morning, or that you have to leave or reschedule something because you need to go to therapy because something has happened in your personal life. I think that is something I'm seeing that's emerging a lot more in our leaders, and I am finding it to be incredibly inspiring And it's increasing my hope a lot with trying to figure out how to balance or find that sweet spot in my own life of this work-life balance, and to be supported by my leaders is just such a gift in my life right now. And I didn't think I'd ever see it, and it's happening, and it is making me a better leader, and it's making me a better conservationist.
I have a follow-up question for that, but I see some more unmute, so I'm gonna come back to my follow-up.
I would have to say, go ahead, Jeff.
No, please. Sonoya.
I was just going to say, 1,000% that resonates with me a ton, Stephanie. I think that is so critical right now. And when I think of the leaders that have really just been a huge part of my life, they are those authentic, real people, because leaders are not robots, they're people. And we are people as well, right? So it's like, we're all people here. And having that compassion and that understanding of who you are as a person, and then them coming alongside you and nurturing and just being there, because you're not just your job, you're not just your role, you're not just your title, you're so much more than that. And so having a leader that not only is there for the professional side of things and to help you to be successful in your work, but also is there to understand that you're a person, and you, hopefully as a follower, thinking about that leader-follower dynamic, also recognize that that leader is a person as well. And I just think that that's a beautiful thing when it is authentic and it is, adaptive. Like Justin says, it just depends on the person, and not everybody's the same. We're all unique. And so having a leader that can be self-aware enough to adapt is critical and powerful.
And I'll build off what both Justin and Tonoya have said with the term self-aware. I think that is the number one attribute of a successful leader, is that they are very aware of what their strengths are, and more importantly, where their shortcomings may be, and trying to find ways to either mitigate those or correct them, or actually change their style and leadership so that they can grow to be a very well-rounded leader in all aspects. So I'm just going to go with self-aware.
I think when I think about my own experiences that have been most powerful with leaders, it's those that when they extend trust, and also and in that way know that they have your back externally as well, or within the organization, and that doesn't mean that you might not have a more critical conversation one-on-one about how things could have been handled better, or what learning moments may have occurred, but to know that you're not going to be undercut, that your expertise is trusted, that there are things that you are empowered to make decisions, and you exercise that judgment, I think is really significant at all levels, and it's something I was fortunate to experience early on in my career, and kind of embed in that I always want to make people feel like I will support them, no matter what, in that way.
Yeah,
Amy, I think that's awesome. Yeah, just awesome for you to have shared that, because, as everybody was sharing kind of what the characteristics of leadership are that they would, tout as like the ones of that mark a phenomenal leader. I was trying to think of the people that I think of as those leaders, and all of those qualities, of course, are important. And I think that empathy and compassion and humility and vulnerability and self-awareness, definitely, right? I think those are the things that I often end up talking about. But trust, Amy, is so, so huge. And thinking about the leaders who I have really tried to emulate, it's the ones who have trusted me. And because they have trusted me, I have trusted them. And I can take that critical feedback to grow and improve, right? And I think that is a quality it probably gets mentioned a lot, but I don't know. It just hit me just now as you were saying that, like, oh yeah, that one's got to move up to the top of my list. Some other qualities that I was thinking about too are integrity, and honesty and reliability, because I think that we can all I think we all talk a lot about empathy and compassion as qualities of leaders, but we also need to make sure that our leaders show up and do what they say they're going to do, or, you know, understand if they can't follow through on the thing that they said they were going to do, there's a reason why, and they're explaining those pieces. And it occurs to me now that that probably also goes back to maintaining and building on that trust as well.
Yeah, I love this idea. We have been talking about this increasingly in AZA conversations, but who's celebrating you when you're not in the room? Who is championing you and talking about how cool you are and how great you are and what a good fit you would be when you can't listen and when you're not there to receive that praise? I think that's very powerful. Again, on that leader follower, just human dynamic. I want to go back to something that Steph said. And thinking about being vulnerable and showing up as your whole person, that is still a relatively new construct, I think, in a lot of our professional areas, particularly because it goes against a very patriarchal and white supremacist notion of showing up as a buttoned up professional who is here for the work and efficiency is our mission and all those kinds of tropes. So how do we do that? How do we show up as our vulnerable selves if we don't feel safe in our spaces, right? How do we model that behavior while still working within a changing construct, right? Because we haven't gone from 0 to 60, we're probably still at like 20. So how do we move that needle without coming across as too much, heavy quotes, or without putting ourselves in a position where we may be compromising some of our own, social capital? How do we get to 60?
I'll just jump in with a word of caution. I absolutely agree with everything you just said, Kathayoon, that the workplace dynamic has changed, that there is more opportunity for vulnerability, but also to say it is a little bit of a pendulum and it probably won't stay this way. There are periods during the 60s where, vulnerability and putting yourself out there was very much part of the culture and bled into the workplace and professionalism and the way that it was perceived. And now we're at a different place that's in a different way, I think, being exposed and out there, but it may eventually swing back to a more traditional lockdown, button down workforce. We don't really know, but I think it's good that people are very in touch with the fact that this time and place is really community to be able to express yourself, be who you want to be in the workplace. And I hope it continues and even gets more so. But I think that word of caution there that, it can tend to swing. So we'll see where it's going.
I think that's a great point. We don't know what the future holds. So what can we do to shape it?
I think it goes back to what Amy and Misha talked about. Trust is that you create a space of trust for vulnerability, but don't require it. So if you have a colleague or a direct report that says, I need to not be here today, that's enough. It doesn't need more. It doesn't need a follow-up question. That you trust that your employee or your team member is going to show up with everything they have when they can, and they're going to communicate to you when they're not, and you can just accept that. Now, if it's something that is proving to be a negative on their ability to perform, then it's a different conversation. But you lead with the empathy and the compassion and the idea that the intent is sound, and you create the space for it, and you do the same for yourself. And if I'm going to show up into my office and I'm not in it for the day, if I want to tell my teammates why, that's my business, but I don't have to. And I think that's really where we start to create those spaces that are trustful, and that the vulnerability is a possibility, but not a requirement.
I also think it'd be great as this conversation continues, and we think about the systems and processes that we have in place that don't require a person to be thinking to be a good leader, right? But we just have systems and processes in place that allow for employees to show up in the ways that they need to. I think that is where we're going. That's where I hope we're going. And I think that the all employees of all levels, whether they're leaders, again, whether they're leaders or not, leaders in a traditional kind of a role or not. I think we're pushing where we're going in the workplace to a place, I hope, where it just becomes baked into how we operate. And I think that's how we get to that next level.
Yeah, I think building on both of those, I think it's starting in your sort of sphere of influence. What is the kind of micro culture that you can impact within your organization or your team? I think with the caveat that you do want to continue to push to make sure that those are things that are codified, right? That you do have policies and consensus on, mental health days or however you want to address them or what that looks like, so that you don't get into issues of inequity across your organization or things like that. But I think that if you build those, and also what, people in marginalized groups have been doing forever is, creating your own spaces, your own individuals, that, network and groups that you trust, to sort of exercise out those pieces. And then I think that comes to this concept of the first follower as well, which is that, you aren't a leader till your first follower. And then it's really the second follower that, if you all know the crazy dancing guy video. And so that idea, I think, is bring those people then and start to test those waters outside, right? If you have someone within your team or within that group, and you can demonstrate that vulnerability in a larger space, and they can demonstrate their support and back up and watch what happens in that way. So it's not quite as much of a risk on your own.
Absolutely, Amy. That reminded me so much. I love that video because it's just such a great depiction of leading and following. And that first follower is huge. And I think sometimes we forget that. But it reminds me of Patrick Lenciani's The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, kind of pulling back to that trust that Amy and Misha and everyone kind of like really held on, and that relation between the leader follower dynamics. And I think, in that model, he talks about trust and conflict and commitment and accountability, and then results. And so when you have that baseline of trust, you don't have a fear of conflict. You aren't avoiding accountability. You're looking at results. You're paying attention to things, and it builds on each other. And I think, for us to keep this momentum going, I think it's going to take some courage, because you need to follow, right? You need to get into the dance with that leader, even though it might be a little bit open, but you also need to be able to challenge your leader in a respectful and kind way. And I think that building, it does help to hold that accountability. But I think it's going to take being really intentional about it to keep that space going in the way that we all hope that it will go. So thanks for that reminder, Amy.
I'm going to jump in on the flip side of what Tanoya was talking about as an employee or a staff person, pushing the envelope of your leader. But I'd also, as a leader, and many of you on this call, I assume, are as well, really being clear and transparent about your expectations and what is a good space and what is a good time to have that space for vulnerability, et cetera, and what's not. So, if I have an employee that comes in every day and spends the first 40 minutes with the team talking about his weekend and, trying to get things off track, in my opinion, I have no right to be upset about that unless at some point I actually talk to that person and say, hey, let's try to keep the water cooler talk more by the water cooler, because we have a really packed schedule, and Monday morning is important to set, our goals for the week. And if we only have that hour, we can't spend the first 20 minutes, just kind of joyfully talking, which is important and good, but being transparent about when it's the right time, et cetera, I think will help from our side. And then, of course, getting what Tanoya was saying, as people who are part of the pack and the group, saying like, okay, what is really important for me to feel close to my employees, and this is part of my, personal and professional network where it merges. So I need to have that time figuring out the right place for it.
Yeah. I like that idea of negotiation across levels, right? And that brings me to my next question, which is the flip of this. So we talked about characteristics of a phenomenal leader. What are some things that no longer bring us joy? What are some things that we want to cast aside or let go of? Some elements of leadership that no longer serve us as we move forward.
I'll jump with entitlement.
Okay.
The leaders that were in places early on in my career made no qualms about the fact that they've earned that spot. You know, they were here for 20 years working, and now I'm the leader, and that's why I make the decisions. And you know, I don't think that has a place in our current work field. You know, that I think there's much more emphasis on merit and good leaders being in good leader positions, not just because they've been there long enough or they knew the right persons, etc. That it really is more of a meritocracy in how leaders are developed these days. And I think that's a great thing. So people who feel entitled to their positions don't have a place, in my opinion, as leaders.
Fascinating.
This one's hard to say out loud. I would say, again, that the compassion and being authentic, not providing that, being that robot is no longer serving me, at least. And then from that point, Jeff was just talking about expectations. I think it's really important to know what your role is, what your job description is. You know, and the negotiation in the beginning, when you jump in on the job, discussing your personality and how, you know, what your strengths and weaknesses are. There's a reason for that. It is kind of a negotiation to go back and forth and say, look, I'm one of those people that like being vulnerable right now on the screen. I have ADHD. It's really, really hard. I want to do so many things all at the same time. And sometimes it's hard to finish. Sometimes it's hard to get really focused. And then other times I'm way too focused and I forget to eat the entire day because I'm just so excited and so in something. That's something that I have to talk to my leader about, and we negotiate back and forth. Okay, well, what's the schedule? Because when you produce something, it's great. So how can we work together on that instead of having like a rigid thing that you have to follow? Everybody has to learn the same way and work the same way and breathe the same way and eat at the same time. That just really didn't work for me. And then of course, yes, your job responsibility, like really knowing what is expected from you and in what time frame. But then lastly, for me, especially as a leader, coordinator, director, whatever, it's important for me to understand why certain things are happening, even if I don't deserve or need to know exactly why, but just knowing like, oh, this is why we're cascading this message out. You know, the reason is because this is what's going on in our budget. That's the best I can get in for at this point of time for what I need to know. And I'm like, okay, cool. I just like to know why certain things happen so that I can have a better understanding of why certain things happen, so that when I cascade it out to our team or any of our partners, when they're like, but why? Or this isn't right. But like, oh, because there's just something going on. We have to readjust our budget. And I don't need to know more details of that, but just knowing those whys and having an idea of what transparency means to my leader compared to what transparency means to me, getting on the same page is extremely helpful. And not having that in the past has always led to a lack of trust and communication breakdowns and confusion stuff. So I'm over that stuff.
So I'm hearing that mind reading is out.
Mind reading is out.
I think unrealistic expectations, and that can that can go into many things, but one that really sticks out for me is time. When we look at the leader, follower dynamic and kind of an employee-employer dynamic or a direct report, is that making unrealistic expectations on somebody else's time is one that's out. The expectation that I'm going to pay you a salary that's 40 hours a week, but you're going to give me 50 or 60. I think that one is less and less is phasing out, but is creating boundaries, and it does come down to a bit to a negotiation. But I think the expectation is that you should have this is a passion field. We're all here because we're passionate about what we do. But you can't eat passion. You get paid. This is a job, and it needs to be treated like a job. You can be passionate about what you do, but also be passionate about other things. So I think that's a big one. I think moving expectations without clear communication is another one. Having worked for leaders of organizations in the past where that was a relatively consistent thing, is it doesn't sow trust. It doesn't make you want to work harder, and it's difficult. So I think those are the two things that really jump out for me. In addition to what has already been said.
I wanted to build a little bit on what Jeff said, and then something that Jess shared in the chat too. I think what is no longer serving us is this kind of continued ties to tenure, and this idea that years of service, both that idea of, you know, how that factors into getting a role, but also this continued celebration of someone staying in a role for a long time as an inherently good thing, for themselves, for a program. And I think that comes at all levels. We talk about AZA service, we talk about committees, we talk about other types of organizations, you know, outside of your primary role. We know we no longer make 10-year strategic plans now, right? We make like 3 to 5 year plans. And I think that we need to really take a look at how that is a part of our culture. And then along with that, this idea of inflexible leaders, right? People that don't have, aren't evolving or have different types of leadership styles they can reach for when shifts in their organizations or their teams or their circumstances demand it. And so being able to know and willing to say, you know, that I was the right leader 5-10 years ago, and I'm no longer the right leader for this particular position and spot now, and moving on with grace when you come to that realization.
Amy, that just reminds me so much. When I started in 2005, I worked for the Omaha Zoo, and I worked there for a couple of years. And then I really wanted to just get out of the Midwest and experience something different. I wanted to see how kids were and how they learned in Florida, for example. I wanted to experience the culture. I wanted to become a scuba diver. So I left, and I just remember all of my mentors, my professors, my family being like, you have to stay at a job for at least 3 to 5 years. Otherwise, this is going to kill your career. It's going to hurt you. And I'm like, but I just gained a lot of really great skills here. I want to go gain other skills and new passions. And from there, you know, I'm sure people can judge me about it, but I typically stay in a job for 1 to 5 years because I really me personally love gaining all new skill sets. I become a scuba diver. I get all these other skill sets. And then somebody else is like, wow, we could really use you as an educator, as a coordinator, and as a diver over here. And so for me, that really helped. But I was shamed so much and judged a lot in the beginning of my career with that mentality that I had to stay in one place forever or I was doomed.
I saw you come off mute. Or Misha, either way.
Oh, Tanoya, you were off mute before I was. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think in terms of, you know, I think especially in our field, a lot of leaders move up with technical and conceptual experience. So, you know, you've been in the role and you're moving up the ranks, and kind of that whole tenure thought of, you know, you have this expertise in specific species or a specific group of animals, and you move up into the ranks. And a lot of times there's not a lot in place to help with building that leadership component of things. And you go from managing and being, you know, around animals to managing people. And there's a huge gap there. And I think that's not going to be sustainable in the future. You know, moving into managing people, you're going to need to be able to also lead people. And so I think that is something that is being recognized within our fields. And, you know, there's some attention going there because you're going to need to learn how to lead people, how to manage systems, and how to juggle all of that. And I think, unfortunately, there's not a lot of that in place as people get promoted through. And so I think those days are shorter than they were in the past. And I think a lot of those reasons are for all the reasons that everyone just stated before me. And I think that that's going to be something we're going to have to look at critically as people promote through.
Misha, did you still want to give your comment?
No, because I'm looking at the time, and I think you have other things you want to get to, and I was going to take us on a tangent, so go for it.
Totally. That was a really fascinating. I've just been like riveted listening to you all. This idea, I didn't even think we would get to this idea of retention being somehow this marker for institutional success, when that's not always necessarily the case. I would much rather my staff leave happy than stay stuck. And we celebrate 20 years in the position, 15 years in the position, which is, it's a good thing to celebrate in some respects. Like if you are happy and growing and contributing, and if that is where you want to be, not because you just kept making more money and felt comfortable there and became stagnant. Steph, I see you come off mute.
Yeah, I think that's why I paused so long, right? When you said, what are those characteristics? I think all of us have to kind of process how to say that. And we want to be respectful, and we understand that different things serve different people, right? Like some people can stay in a job for 20 years and they're rocking it and they're doing good, they're gaining, they're growing, their team is, and their mission is still benefiting from that. I totally get that. I just know so many people in my travels, and I worked in film production as well. So I got to pop around to so many different zoos and have, happy hours and coffees with so many people, that because I tend to be more towards the 60 Kathayoon on the personality, where I'm extremely vulnerable and extremely open. And I think that's just my way of trying to push that needle, even though it might hurt my social capacity. I don't know. But I just really was nervous to say out loud that, like, I'm sorry, some people you can tell are miserable. Some people want to move on and they feel like they're stagnant and they need to be revitalized again, especially in our career where it doesn't turn off. We don't work 8 to 5. Like everything we do and we think about and we're passionate about is every minute of the day. Every food we touch is impacts an animal out in the wild. So for me, like if I felt like I gained what I needed to move on. And it was very scary for me to open up and be like, we need to talk about this, because there's some people that are in those positions and it might be personal too. And I can't judge that, because that's a thing too. But there's some people that are in positions that are not happy, are not passionate, aren't trying to be a better leader. And they can make the choice to move on, but there's a lot of fear attached to that. And I want those people to know that there are options, and I've done it and I made it through, and it's okay, and actually thrived and was supported by amazing people and revitalized and all that stuff. So it's there, and it could make us better and help out the conservation mission better in the long run.
I imagine that headline, I survived, I changed jobs, and it was okay.
I think it's to that point, is that tenure is one measurement of success, but it's not the only measurement of success. And it's very case by case. And as Stephanie alluded to, is that and you did as well, Kathayoon, there are people who are, leaders in this field, either organizationally or just by, who they are, that are highly successful for long periods of time in same places. And then there's people who will move to a new challenge and are highly successful there for a couple of years and then go on to another one. So I think that mentality of, I need to stick this out so I can get up is not helpful in some cases. And I think it really is something that we need to re-examine.
Tanoya. Oh, let's go Misha first, then Tanoya, because I see Misha's unmuted.
I was just going to say, making observation here that, I hesitated at the beginning of this question because I didn't know how to quite articulate what I wanted to say. And Jeff really hit it on the mark, that I think that piece of entitlement and sort of like, I paid my dues, so I get this position, and those sorts of mentalities. I think that's probably what I would have said. But I also think that, that mentality is attached to a more traditional style of leadership. And the folks who are not leaving their jobs or not moving on to the next thing, or who are perpetuating these outdated styles of leadership, right? Or more traditional, whatever, however you want to say it. They don't have the mindset to think differently. That's not part of their vocabulary necessarily. And it's interesting to me, just making this observation, that we have these kinds of conversations about a new style of leadership. What do emerging leaders, what kinds of qualities do we want them to possess, etc. And then some of those people hit the ceiling where they can't move with these cultivated new skills. They can't move into that next role because there's somebody sitting in that role who has a different mindset. They don't think there's anything wrong with it. So I'm just making that observation.
No one right answer. Tanoya, and then Jeff. If Jeff's unmuted to speak.
I'm definitely building off of Misha as well, and as all of the comments, and then Kim in the chat sort of captured that as well. And I think that that is an important aspect of leadership, especially as we think about diversifying the field. When you diversify the field, you're going to bring a diversity of thought, you're going to bring different backgrounds. And if you as a leader have a person in a role that is literally causing your team to bleed and leave or have to move, or there's toxicity, I think that there's a place to help that person find a better organizational fit. And I know that's a hard part of leadership. I've never been in that situation as of yet in my career. And I'm sure, that takes a lot, but there is that opportunity as a leader to help that person grow. And if that person can't grow there with that team or that organization, then it serves them better, and it is kind to help them grow somewhere else. And I know that that's hard, but I think that's the reality as we think about team dynamics and helping people to grow and better. And if they're not willing to move on to the next thing, then there might be some support needed.
All right, so I'm going to take it in a little bit of a different direction, and really looking at Kim's comment in the chat room. I think this all kind of started with a tossed up question by Kathayoon saying, what is the most important characteristics or trait that we need in the leaders of tomorrow? And so I came already with my answer on that one. It's really interesting that it's kind of coming full circle with the conversation. And the one thing that I was going to say that we really need is the ability to inspire. And I think this goes directly into the conversation we have right now, is that the workforce of today is very different than it was even 10 years ago, and more so because of the pandemic, that sometimes it is in the best interest of the individuals for their career, for the fulfillment, to jump around in jobs, to find different opportunities. But as leaders of tomorrow, we have to figure out how to retain the best talent, how to keep them in the field, how to keep them in the jobs, keep them in your organization, and have a career trajectory that works for them and actually helps them grow and expand. And it isn't the same inherent loyalty to an organization that there used to be out there. People are loyal to the field, they have a passion, but as leaders coming to positions in these organizations, you're going to have to figure out how to really inspire them and get them excited about the field, their job, the organization, their coworkers, and you're gonna have to have that ability to keep them there and have them want to come into work every morning. To me, that's one of the biggest things about my job fulfillment, is I want to come into work. So, and I know coming to work no longer means physically walking into an office like it used to, but the idea to be part of that organization and that job is going to be what we really need our leaders of tomorrow to embrace and to personify that inspiration.
So if I can add, I think I wanted to say something that I think is a little bit radical and push a little bit harder on some of this, and will probably make some people uncomfortable and maybe mad or feel personally attacked. So just ask for grace to sit with that, which is that I think, and this is building, I think that yes, and to this idea of yeah, sometimes people do thrive in a long time in their position, or we do think about how are we retaining people in the field. But last week we had the opportunity to host the ECHO conference, and one of the speakers was someone who has a previous cult member and who now works as a cult deprogrammer. And the conversations, as might not surprise many of you, led to this question of, are we the cult? And zoos and aquariums in this field we do share a lot of characteristics of, of some cult-like behavior. And I think that we have to also push to think about, is leaving the field, what does that mean, right? Are there opportunities for you to go work for other types of nonprofits, cultural or conservation based, to take your skills and whatever it is that you do, work in other types of businesses and see what other organizations do, and come back or carry forward your passion and your mission focus to other types of work, and not feel like you have betrayed the community, lost your way, or don't have the ability to come back and work at a zoo or aquarium in the future. Because I think that also feeds into this entitlement of, well, I work in this field, I am a leader in this area, and it's the only facility in my city or my region, and I have a family or I have other commitments that mean that I can't leave. and really interrogating those ideas of, is it the best, not just for the organization, but for you, for the field? Are you having that impact? What could you do? And just think, sort of unpacking all of that a little bit, that it is okay to think about all of this work more broadly, and particularly with opportunities for remote work and things like that. And just, you may end up in that same place that you are, and then hopefully revalidate and reignite your purpose and your roles, but really challenging, is that enough of a reason to stay where you are? And so.
Can I jump in really quick on that? Because that resonates with me huge. I'm sure it resonates with a lot of people. Amy and probably Kathayoon were both people that I called when it was time for me to make that step. And I cried my eyes out because I wasn't ready, but I knew that I needed to make a step of faith out, and I needed to grow and learn. And I had been at my facility for 12 years and it was home. I mean, it was like I was ingrained. I was hopeful that I would, stay and help and do all the things. But it was the hardest but best decision I ever made for my career. I've learned and grown so much. And as of 2 months ago, I'm actually back at that first facility consulting, which is amazing. Never saw that coming. So absolutely, like it is hard because you build yourself in this space and this identity, and it's a big part of you, but it's not all of you. And so moving out and exploring and growing, like Stephanie said, is sometimes great, or a lot of times great.
I think with that, as I mentioned earlier, have the pleasure of knowing all of the people on this quite well, and having a network like this is really important, because there's not one person on this panel that I wouldn't feel comfortable picking up a phone call and have and said, hey, I want to talk to you about this thing. And that thing might be something that's happening at work. It might be the next opportunity. It might be, any of those, those life-changing sort of, gut checks. And I remember having a conversation with Tanoya about moving careers. I remember having a conversation with Jeff about moving careers, and had a very honest conversation in a bar in San Francisco about leaving the field and going to teach, and having that very short conversation sticks out in my mind, and it's part of the reason I'm still in this field. So I think one thing that we often lose sight of in this space is that we have a wonderful community. You have leaders in your own groups that will be able to listen and have that transparency, that vulnerability, and the trust to do it. And I think that's really an important part of this. And it's what I love about these calls. It's what I love about these various communities that I'm able to be a part of, is that all of these people wants what's best for you. And sometimes an outside thought, an outside word of encouragement will help move you towards what they think will be best for you that you may not see yet.
I would say there's times that, I was in the zoo world and I wanted to take that education, that me as an educator, what I learned, and I wanted to go work on a dive boat. And then I got to see everything out in real time, see the coral, see the sharks, see how everything interacted and how people learned, and what really opened their eyes and increased empathy. And I was like, this is what I'm gonna do forever. And then I got to a point in my career where I was like, wow, I want more structure. I want the community. I want to influence how conservation strategic plans look. And what did it take for me to come back to a zoo specifically? And to me, the conservation field is really diverse. We have lots of options. But the reason why I came back to the zoo was exactly what Jeff and all of us has been talking about, because I found one of those leaders that was inspiring, that was enthusiastic, that was flexible, but still very driven and focused and professional. And that is what brought me back, because that's what I was craving that whole time. And through the exploration of gaining those new skills and taking those risks and talking to my community, that leader was somebody I'm like, yes, that's what I want. That's what I want to learn from. And that's why I'm back working for a zoo.
What a good place. What a good conversation in general. It's just so funny because, Jeff, I think you alluded to this, that you came in with all these things that you were planning on saying about a very specific topic. We came to talk about leadership in a kind of constantly complex conservation world. But I think instead we talked about the constant complexity of being a human being and a leader. And I think hearing all of you, some of the big threads and takeaways that I'm thinking about are the idea that we need to continually have that growth mindset and ability to change our minds, to adapt to the individual needs of our communities, of our organizations, of our people, and also of ourselves. And Jeff, I'm still thinking about that self-awareness that you talked about. And I think that self-awareness feeds so much into the way that we treat others, the extent to which we feel like we can treat ourselves and know ourselves. And so we only have 3 minutes. I want to hear I want to hear in the chat if anyone has anything that's still circling around for you, or something that you heard someone say that was significant that you'll be thinking about later. And from our panelists in our last 2 minutes, I would like you to, my favorite closing, tell me one thing that you heard someone else say that you're still thinking about. Not something you said, something someone else said that you're still thinking about.
I like how all of you instantly started looking over there.
There's a really interesting ceiling panel.
I'll just say that I thank you so much, Kathayoon, for pulling this together, and to Canopy as well, and for inviting me to be a part of this panel. Even if I had just been sitting in the audience, I think I would have been inspired. But to share some space with these other incredible people is an incredible honor. And it's not one thing that anybody specifically said, but just the mishmash. I don't know. Caffeine maybe hasn't quite kicked in yet, but the conversation as a whole that we've had today, this morning, I think will sit with me for a while, and it's sparked some more ideas and things that are just baby ideas. So I don't want to share them yet because they're just baby ideas. But I really, really appreciate the direction that this conversation went.
And I'll jump in and say I've been ruminating, and I believe it was Stephanie who said how important for her it is to understand the why and not just the what. I think transparency is so critical, but it's always such a good reminder that not everybody has been in 20 meetings about this issue. And then when you come out with a resolution and talk to them about what you as a leader would like to see done, that you've always got to talk about the why. Even if you know it, it doesn't mean everyone in the room doesn't. So thank you, Stephanie, for that reminder. I think it's a really important one for all of us leaders.
I think for the one point Stephanie put up is that it took going away. It took leaving the field, leaving the zoos, not leaving conservation, but leaving the zoo field, to realize that at a point that wasn't fitting anymore, and that was the cause for her to come back. And somebody put in the chat about it being about the mission, not the organization. And I think that's a big part of it is finding a mission. And, there's lots of organizations that share that mission. And I think there's the ability to move sideways and move back and forward and up and down and all those things. And, it's following the opportunity. It's something that when people ask about how I ended up where I am is following the opportunity, I think is a big one that comes to mind. And Stephanie put it in a really good story.
I appreciate Amy being bold enough to say that sometimes we can have cult-like behavior. I think that's a lot of what I was feeling too. And just with some of our leaders expecting us, whether they were saying cult or not, right? I think it's just some of the past leadership that a lot of us have grown up with. And of course, not all of them, but some of them made me feel like I had to give up everything in my personal life, that I had to stay in one place, that I had to excel with this one way of excelling. And without the transparency, without the community, without the inclusion, and that's what does feel culty. And that's when it started feeling unhealthy and toxic. And I think it just spreads throughout our field, especially when it doesn't ever turn off from 8 to 5. So for me, I really appreciate you saying that, because it's something that I've been kind of saying, but not been bold enough to say that, because that is unhealthy. And I think if we practice some of the things that we've all been talking about, for what we want to see in leadership, what we see happening, understanding, like you said, Jeff, there, and Kathy, we were talking about pendulums, like we can go too far with things, but then we learn, we fail forward, we learn forward and grow. Then I think we'll be going in the direction that we all want to be going. That's healthier, more productive.
I want to respect people's time. It is 10:02. I know Amy and Tanoya have not been able to share their closings. But for those of you who do need to step off, thank you so much for joining us. For our panelists, thank you so much for joining us. I can stay on for one more minute if Amy or T wants to share. I'm also happy if people decide they need to leave now. Adaptable.
I was just going to really quickly building on what Jeff said about that pendulum and thinking about how are we not chasing trends, but continuing to just build our broad leadership toolkit and the flexibility to be the best leader for the situation and know when we are not.
Love it. Bring us home, T.
I'll just say I'm grateful for everyone on the panel, everyone that was able to join. Thank you, Kathayoon and Canopy, for putting this together. It was a really rich, awesome, amazing conversation, and I'm just excited for the future for all of us leaders.
Agreed. Future is bright. We are so incredibly blessed to have all these brains and so many others in our field. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you on another Canopy call sometime in the very near future, and in person and all over. Bye, everybody.